Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, if you've ever just felt completely overwhelmed by the rush of modern life and wished you could escape to a hidden sanctuary, well, you are absolutely going to love what we're exploring today. Imagine I'm your personal horticultural consultant, and we're taking an exclusive behind-the-scenes tour of one of the most meticulously crafted gardens in the entire UK. We're heading down to Compton Acres in Poole, Dorset. We're going to explore the stunning horticulture, the hidden cultural symbolism, and honestly, the rigorous conservation it takes to maintain a historic masterpiece like this. Let's get right into it. So are you ready to step into a miniature landscape? Seriously, just take a deep breath, leave all that outside noise behind us, and let's cross the threshold together. Today, we're focusing specifically on a space within this massive 10-acre estate that is widely considered one of the absolute finest of its kind in the country. Welcome to the Japanese garden. Okay, let's dive into this. Our journey actually kicks off exactly a century ago, back in 1924. The estate's original owner, a man named Thomas Simpson, had just returned from these incredibly extensive world travels. And he was so deeply inspired by what he saw in the East that he didn't just try to, sketch it from memory. No way. The sheer effort of what he did next is just astounding. He literally brought over authentic Japanese craftsmen and genuine stone artifacts, shipping the whole shebang entirely by sea across the globe to build this space. And because of that wild dedication to authenticity, the layout we're walking through today is virtually unchanged from when those craftsmen first laid the stones. But before we get too far down the path, we kind of need to understand the exact type of space we're actually in. In the horticultural world, Compton Acres features what we academically call a stroll garden. Now, this isn't just some random collection of pretty plants. A stroll garden is a highly intentional representation of a massive landscape. Think mountains, deep valleys, sweeping oceans, but entirely condensed into miniature. It's specifically designed to take you on a physical and spiritual journey, revealing these perfectly framed, differing views and traditional ornaments as you follow the contoured land. It's like walking through a giant living puzzle. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it highlights a common misconception. When a lot of folks hear Japanese garden, they immediately picture a Zen Buddhism garden, right? The dry ones focused purely on static meditation, with the raked sand representing oceans and barely any planting. But our stroll garden here at Compton Acres is a completely different beast. It's deeply immersive, it's alive. It requires expansive paths, massive earth moving to create those artificial valleys and mounds, and a lush, constantly shifting palette of flora to actually bring this miniature world to life. As we wander down the path, you're going to notice the architecture scattered around us. These are the classic built elements carefully placed by those original craftsmen back in 1924. And they aren't just there to look pretty. Take the traditional tea house perched next to the pond, for example. That represents harmony, respect, and tranquility. It's essentially the ceremonial anchor for the entire space. And those brilliant red lacquered footbridges, they aren't just for keeping your feet dry. In Japanese culture, they symbolize a really profound transition, physically guiding you from the mundane, everyday, mortal world into a truly sacred space. Add in the stepping stones, the stone lanterns, the pagodas, and that gentle clack of the bamboo shishi odashi, the deer scarer, and you are looking at an absolute masterclass in atmospheric design. And anchoring, literally, all of these built elements together is water. As the highly respected horticultural consultant Mary Payne always points out, in a stroll garden, water is always a feature. Just imagine yourself carefully stepping across those stones over the pond, looking down at the brightly coloured koi carp gliding just beneath the surface. The water here isn't just an aesthetic choice, it's absolutely crucial. It fundamentally represents calm and the very essence of life, acting as a tranquil mirror reflecting the changing sky right above us. Let's move to and see how this builds. Because since this is a living stroll garden, it's in a constant state of transformation. It's amazing to watch how the horticultural calendar is perfectly orchestrated to dictate the mood of the space. We start with a delicate awakening of cherries and azaleas in the spring, transition into elegant Japanese water iris during the high summer, move into those fiery Japanese maples in the autumn. And finally, we rest on the enduring, solid structure of evergreen pines in the winter. It's a dynamic, breathing canvas that completely reinvents itself every few months. So if we happen to be strolling through in the spring, the awakening is literally explosive. That traditional tea house we talked about earlier gets entirely draped in this vibrant cascading wisteria. It's stunning. But what I really love from a botanical perspective is how the original designers adapted their vision to the UK climate. For example, instead of relying only on traditional cherry blossoms that might actually struggle in a confined British space, they use the Fuji cherry. Its wiry twigs give us fantastic architectural interest in the winter, and then boom, it's a brilliant substitute for the classic spring flower display. And that pairs perfectly with the massive, luxurious mouton peonies blooming right nearby. Now, if we visit later in the year, the vibe shifts completely into this glowing, deeply reflective space. The true rock stars here are the Acer palmatum, the Japanese maples. They're actually quite fussy and require really specific, sheltered positions so they don't get windburn. But when they're placed just right, wow. They offer up the most incredible autumnal fiery tints. And right beneath them, we've got Hakanekloa macra, or Hakane grass, adding its own beautifully tinted autumn foliage. Together, they create this rich, warm understory that rustles in the coastal Dorset breeze. Honestly, it sounds almost exactly like distant ocean waves. But you might be wondering, how do we actually maintain the structure of this miniature landscape? Just look at the pine trees scattered throughout the rocky outcrops. So the crucial point is that we don't just hack these into neat, geometric, topiary shapes. That would instantly ruin the illusion of wild nature. Instead, we take incredible time and care to select the proper specimens, meticulously prune out new shoots, and carefully train the branches. The goal is to basically trick your eye into thinking these relatively young trees are giant, ancient, weather-beaten bonsai that have been clinging to a mountainside for centuries. It's a process that requires the kind of patience most of us can only dream of. Now, obviously, maintaining a century-old historic garden isn't just quiet strolls and poetry. Back in the real world, as a consultant, I deal heavily with the strict administrative side of conservation. Because, as it turns out, nature requires a surprising amount of paperwork these days to maintain a living museum like this. Since Compton Acres sits inside a designated conservation area and has been protected by tree preservation orders since 1962, every single tiny adjustment to that canopy requires rigorous arboricultural documentation and formal approval from the local government. To give you a real sense of the immense scale of the forestry management happening just out of sight, an incredible 828 trees were formally surveyed across the site during just one of their major tree work applications. 828! That is a massive undertaking. It just goes to show that managing a miniature landscape actually requires macroscopic, site-wide strategic planning to make sure the whole ecosystem stays healthy. When we're managing those trees, we have to submit highly detailed work schedules for things like selective felling and crown lifting. For instance, in one major application, they proposed selectively felling 123 overcrowded or poor quality trees and pruning dozens more. Why go to all that trouble? Well, balancing light and shade is absolutely vital. If the canopy gets too dense, those delicate Japanese maples and Fuji cherries in the understory get starved of light and essentially suffer from drought. So good silvicultural practice, like carefully lifting the crowns of the big, majestic beech and Scots pine trees, makes sure our miniature landscape down below continues to thrive without fighting for resources. And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate purpose behind all this hard work: the pruning, the endless paperwork, and the planning. Mary Payne, MBE, the horticultural consultant responsible for this very garden, summed it up perfectly. She called this garden a space in which to think, meditate, or reflect in this bizarre, frenetic world in which we live. Every single stone laid, every pruned pine, and every drop of water is meticulously maintained specifically to preserve that essential feeling of refuge. Which brings our little tour to a close today, but I want to leave you with a thought as you head back out into that frenetic world. You might not have 10 acres, a red lacquered bridge, or your own team of arborists, but you can absolutely take the philosophy of the stroll garden, that intentionality, that calm, and that appreciation for the changing seasons, and apply it to your own daily life. So I'll leave you with this. How will you cultivate your own miniature landscape of calm today? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Until next time, keep exploring.